Look, Biden and his son are stone cold crooked, and you know it. His son walks out with millions of dollars. The kid knows nothing. You know it, and so do we.
So let me be clear. While Senator Sandoval is under investigation, it's in the best interests of our state that he no longer serve as chairman of the Transportation Committee. If he doesn't step aside, he should be removed.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Terry Martin with the Illinois Channel.
Jeff Berkowitz here in Chicago, Illinois.
And Jeff, we have a full show, and ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot to go over. We're going to try to get through it all. It's a big week, and as we just showed, there kind of the thing we're going to start off with is the idea of just what's going on, kind of a scandalous time, both at the national level and at the state level. And we want to start off by saying just because accusations are made against people, that doesn't mean that they're guilty. We should always have the presumption of innocence. But Jeff, we mentioned last time we talked that Senator Martin Sandoval, his offices in Springfield were raided by the FBI, and a bunch of boxes were taken out, and we didn't know much more than that at the time, and we still don't know a whole lot more, but the story is developing, and now we have the governor commenting that the senator, who is the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee, should leave his position.
Well, more than that, we've also had village halls in the suburbs of LaCook or Lyon and Summit, areas that are small in population, big in industry, ripe for payoffs, ripe for kickbacks, okay? We've had more stuff on red camera, which indicates possible kickbacks. We've had IDOT into this mess. And that's maybe why the governor's really getting concerned and wants to make sure things are as clean as he can make it. So you basically have a hint of a lot of construction issues, you know, and when you have $45 billion in the capital fund in the next 6 years coming out, you're a little concerned if it comes out that some of the people, as you say, presumption of innocence. But if you're the governor, you're a little concerned about who's being investigated and how close those folks were to the capital fund project, $45 billion that you just championed.
Yeah, $45 billion over 6 years, and the governor said in the remarks that he made just yesterday that, you know, it has to be very clear that there's not going to be any scandal or corruption involved in the spending of this money. Again, Senator Sandoval under investigation. We don't know why. We don't know what the FBI is looking at. In fact, recently, let me just put up a graphic to show the people. Some of the members of the Capitol Press Corps here in Springfield were asking Senator John Cullerton, the Senate President, to release the search warrant that he got as far as searching the offices of Senator Sandoval, and it was heavily redacted.
You see half the document or a third of the document redacted. Makes it very hard to know what the hell's going on.
Well, and
I'm not saying it's not proper. There are legitimate legal reasons that entitle folks sometimes to redact a document before they make it available. It is, I think, being challenged now by WBEZ. They can take whoever has redacted this. I guess in this case, it may be Senate President Cullerton.
Well, and it blocks out, it blocks out a lot of the names. It blocks out different companies. So John Patterson, a former reporter, is now a spokesman for the Senate President. He said decisions were guided by an Attorney General's opinion, case law, and discussions with the investigative authorities. They're still pursuing the idea that we need to have a clean example, that the people have a right to know what is being looked at and why and what suspicions are there. And again, we caution always, the presumption of innocence. Senator Sandoval is not guilty of anything until the government can support allegations with some evidence.
Two big picture items. I think the name is Verona. I mean, it's the asphalt king. This guy who contends that you can have recycled material in the asphalt, comes out just as good. People differ with that. That involves IDOT in that decision. There's big money in that decision. Asphalt, paving, road building historically has been a major issue for bid rigging and for antitrust, actually antitrust issues coming up in Illinois, and people going to jail over that. Always a big issue. There's a lot of asphalt in that $45 billion. There's a lot of horizontal, which would be roads and otherwise in that. And the second big picture item is in the last 30 years, there's been a lot of difference between prosecutions, could be coincidental, as to whether the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, that's the person behind this, has been appointed by a Republican president or by a Democratic president. And you might remember Patrick Fitzgerald appointed at the push by Peter Fitzgerald, the senator, who got Bush to appoint him in 2001. He then stayed, unusually, through a Democratic President Obama, 12 years. Now we have John Lausch, who was in the U.S. Attorney's Office and trained essentially under Patrick Fitzgerald. So this guy's been going at it for 2 years. Now we're seeing what he's got. We didn't have a lot in the 5 years in between with Zach Pardon.
Is you just had the governor calling for Senator Sandoval to step down as chairman of the Transportation Committee. Senator Cullerton, the Senate president who would appoint him, has not removed him from that committee. So there's a little bit of a division. We'll see if Senator Cullerton acts to remove Senator Sandoval as committee chair. So that's one thing we would tell the viewers to watch for. And if not, then we'll have to see what the governor has to say or do about that. As a committee chair, as a committee chair, Senator Sandoval also makes about $10,000 more on top of his regular salary. The other thing I would just mention is he is the second senator right now under investigation. Senator Tom Cullerton, no relation to John Cullerton, the president, or actually a distant cousin, I think, who I know. He's a very affable person, and again, he has the presumption of innocence, but just keeping score here, we do have a number of investigations going on of some of the Senate Democratic leaders. One of the big stories, maybe the biggest story, and this is a Chicago story, but obviously so much of Chicago, the dollars involved, the people involved, are things to consider even if we're downstaters. And what might be happening is a strike coming up by the Chicago's Teachers Union. Jeff, let's start off with a bite here by Mayor Lori Lightfoot as she addressed some of the issues involved.
Following a detailed study, BERIG recommended a 5-year contract that would instead provide teachers a 16% pay raise over 5 years. He also recommended a 1% healthcare cost increase over the 5-year term, which means that in the first 2 years of the proposed contract, there would be no changes in increase in healthcare, and then only a 1% in the remaining 3 years.
A lot of people are saying 16% increase in teacher salaries over 5 years. When you factor in step increases, lanes, all of that stuff, the average teacher is getting a 5% increase over 5 years. It's an average of 5% a year. That's guaranteed. 50% of the population in Chicago make less than $50,000. In 5 years, your new teacher, or in 5 years, your average teacher at CPS will be making $100,000. I just don't hear those numbers much when I hear this discussion, but you can find that and many others in the discussion and article in wirepoints.com by John Klingner and Ted Dabrowski. That's wirepoints.com. There's much more. This is a terribly, terribly expensive contract. People are just beginning to understand the ramifications, and yet, CTU is threatening a strike. They didn't get enough so far, and so if they don't get what they want, they're threatening to strike on October 17th. And as we tape here, on October 4th, that's less than 2 weeks away, the mayor doesn't want to strike, but some would say maybe it's good they don't want this contract. Maybe she should rescind it. Is it really too much for a city that is in trouble, that some would say is going to need bankruptcy to bail it out, if they can't get the state to bail it out, that's got, $70 billion in unfunded pensions when you count CPS and other parts of the city? Do you really want this contract?
Yeah, so this could be what we'll have to see, this could be, if they go on strike, a long, drawn-out strike. Now, what's interesting is some people would say Mayor Lightfoot is sitting there waving the white flag saying, I'm going to give you everything you want, and as she does that, the Chicago Teachers Union is rejecting when she's capitulating. Let's listen to the mayor basically saying, hey, I agree, I'm going to give you basically what you're looking for.
Into our budget, all the things that they said that they wanted, which we agree with, more social workers, more librarians, more nurses. The deal is there to be had, and there's no reason over 30 days that we can't get this inked and done.
She said no reason why we can't get this done, but the teachers union have a bit of a different viewpoint on that. They're saying,
Can I make just
Sure.
an important note? That clip that you just showed, people should know, was 2 months ago at the end of August. They had already given them everything they wanted at the end of August. They got more, Terry, over the last 2 months, and they're still asking.
let's look at what
We're
the,
taping, that was 2 months ago, she was saying that we gave them everything they want 2 months ago, and then they gave them more, and that's still not enough. I mean, just think of this. A second-year teacher, Terry, will have a salary go from $53,000 now in 5 years to $72,000. Folks, if you're starting college now, you go 4-year college degree that includes a teaching credential, you can come out and you can follow into that pattern. You can start as a second-year teacher making, what, $72,000, working essentially 8 months a year, 7 hours a day.
well, and
Sounds
to
like a
put this
pretty
in
good job,
perspective, first of all, that's just the salary. That doesn't include the pensions. That doesn't include the health care. Right.
Right.
So let's,
Right.
those add up. Let's take a look for a minute here from the Illinois Policy Institute, who kind of compared some of the numbers. And we see there that it says under the CTU's demand with the 5% annual salary increases, that the cost would come with what they're looking for, according to the Illinois Policy Institute, $1.1 billion over 3 years, where the mayor's proposed salary increases and additional staffing, they say, would cost $216 million over that period of time. You can always be, somewhat suspect as far as what the real numbers are. But the Chicago Teachers Union has a different take on this. And what they're saying is that they don't think it's a question over the actual pay. Yes, they want the salary increases. But as they're saying, there's a reason, this is from the Chicago Teachers Union, there's a reason Mayor Lightfoot keeps emphasizing the 16% raise over 5 years, or she puts it, that's real dough. She knows that the Chicago Teachers Union can't make too big of an issue out of class size and wraparound employees, those being like counselors and librarians. She's got the union in a bit of a box, and she knows it. The union wants Lightfoot to relinquish complete control of the purse strings by contractually stipulating a certain number of nurses, counselors, and librarians per student or school. And Jeff, what they're saying is that even if the mayor says, hey, I'll agree to hire more counselors and more librarians, what they're saying, there's a big difference between saying you're going to hire someone and then hiring them. And they want to say, they want it in their contract that there's going to be X number of counselors, X number of librarians and support staff hired for the different schools.
But again, to give people an idea of what we're talking about here in numbers, again, coming from wirepoints.com, Ted Dabrowski, John Klinger, CPS is promising to add how many new social workers? 200 new social workers over the next 5 years. 250 additional full-time nurses over the next 5 years. We're talking, and remember, each of those is a dues paying, they're going to be a part of the CTU, okay? Even though the CTU stands for Chicago Teachers Union, they'll be a part of that. They'll be paying dues. If you're running the union, how many members do you have? And how much do they pay in dues? That's the big thing. That's what gives you the power, okay? And let's get real. The mayor, in case the union hasn't noticed this, came into office, she said, with $1 billion deficit of a $10 billion budget. And then she narrowed it in the first 3 months to an $838 million deficit. And we'll find out, she says, on October 23rd or thereabouts, how she's going to handle that $838 million deficit. So she wants to have some flexibility because she may not be able to meet those commitments. Should she have that as mayor? Or should that be bound, should she be tied up
Well,
and bound?
this is the thing,
by
who
a
manages
contract?
the government? Is it the elected official? If you start stipulating that the mayor has to hire something, then it is taking away the power of the mayor to manage the city. And just like a businessman operating a business, you have to sometimes keep positions unfilled. You have to sometimes lay people off as revenues go down. And we know the city of Chicago is in a tight spot. Let me show a little video of one of the Chicago Teachers Union, and we get this video courtesy of Channel 7 in Chicago, we have one of the teachers talking so we can get the viewpoint from some of the union members who recently held a rally.
My story is that last year in my classroom, I had 40 students in my classroom. And that was in second grade. Second grade students, 40 students in my classroom. Now we sit at the bargaining table and they don't even want to talk about class size. They don't want to, it's not strikeable, but it should be negotiable. They should put a cap on it. This year, the kindergarten classroom at my school had 39 students. 39 students.
Well, Terry, what we just heard in that clip, I don't think that can be true for many of the classrooms. Could be true for that teacher's classroom. But you have to remember, Terry, a few salient points that the CTU did not tell you, she did not tell you. One is the current budget for the CTU, $7.7 billion. Terry, that's in addition to the $10 billion budget for the city of Chicago. People sometimes think CPS is not a part. It is, in that sense. So $7.7 billion, and she didn't tell you that over the last 20 years, the number of students at CPS has declined from 430,000 to 360,000. And she didn't tell you that the operating cost over the last 20 years, operating costs, not counting capital costs, went from about $8,000 to $17,000 per kid per year. When you include all of the capital costs, all costs, you divide 360,000 into $7.7 billion, you get the cost, average cost per kid per year in the city of Chicago, $21,000, $21,400. If that's not enough to make sure that we don't have 40 classrooms, I don't know what is. I'm serious. I'm smiling, but I mean, those are eye-popping numbers.
You know, just the when you say $7.8 billion for the Chicago Public Schools, you know, I'm going to point out, folks, that is a larger budget than many states around the nation. And you know, you're right. It just seems like it's such a large number that you know, I obviously don't know all the details that are in there, but it's huge. And the other thing is, how much more can the Chicago taxpayers afford to pay? And at what point, we already have people fleeing the state of Chicago from around the state, not just in Chicago. I said the state of Illinois, I misspoke. We have people fleeing the state of Illinois, not just Chicago. But you know, as you continue to add more taxpayer property taxes, which are already very high in the state of Illinois, and you add them in Chicago, that's certainly not going to help the mayor or anyone else try to bring in more business to the city of Chicago when you keep adding that. And how much more can the taxpayers? The taxpayers, you pointed out early in the conversation, you'd have a second-year teacher making $72,000, and we say plus pension, plus health care. If you look at how many people in the United States make $72,000, it is an extremely low number. In fact, I believe the average, on average, the household, if you have two people making income, the average household income in America is about $60,000. So, you know, just to put that in some context.
And the other thing, if these people have Social Security, which many of these teachers don't have, But if those folks who you're talking about, the non-teachers, if they have Social Security, they're not getting this kind of pension. Listen to this. Currently, okay, currently the average teacher in CPS, if they're retiring in the last year or two, and they have been there full-time 30, 34 years, their salary is approaching $100,000. I think it's about $98,000. That's their current salary, Terry. And their pension would start, if they've retired in the last year or two, at $70,000 a year. Now that's more than these other folks who are paying the taxes are making, currently. And they're not, if they're making less, if half the people are making less than $50,000 a year who are paying taxes, they're not going to be retiring with a pension of $70,000.
And if,
Now,
and not only, well, not only that, but then if you kick in 3% automatic pay increase, right?
right.
And and that
before
means,
this contract.
well, 3% on 70,000 is $2,100.
And these people in the future are going to be retiring, these teachers, with basically looking at a future of another $2 million in pension.
It brings up the point that, the New York Times recent article here, that maybe states should be allowed to declare bankruptcy as Puerto Rico is. And you see the headline there, $129 billion Puerto Rico bankruptcy plan could be the model for states. These people in the public sector, maybe their demands are reasonable, but reasonable or not, there's only so much money to go around, Jeff, and the taxpayers in Illinois are saying enough already.
For the last 4 years in a row, the Chicago area has lost population. Illinois is not doing so well either on the population front. We lost a few years ago, well, in the last decennial census, we lost 2 U.S. representatives. So we're losing population relative to other states. People are projecting in the next census, Illinois will lose another 1 to 2 U.S. representatives. So we're losing population relative to other states in the United States of America, as Illinois is. So we're in trouble. We're in financial trouble. We have a $200 billion unfunded pension hole that people are going to be asked to somehow pay for unless we go as a state bankruptcy. And Puerto Rico provides a model, according to whom? According to the New York Times. That ain't a right-wing organization.
Isn't about Puerto Rico. It's that Puerto Rico went bankrupt, and we say states can't go bankrupt, and we're trying to say, whether you say states can't go bankrupt or not, if they're going to run out of money. And Jeff, it's not just at Chicago, it's not just Chicago Public Schools, it's not just at the state level. In Illinois, as our friends over at WirePoints point out, we have any number of municipalities across the state that are going bankrupt for the same reason. WirePoints just put out this chart here, fire and police, and you can look down the list, Cicero, Granite City, Alton, Danville, they are woefully underfunded, and they go down, even the best of them, the Cicero firefighters, are funded at only 29% of what they need, with $82 million, that top one. $82 million unfunded, and you go on down, and again, it goes on down to where they're like 14, 15% funded. These are unsustainable, and all of these, what happens then is the comptroller, and this is happening already to East St. Louis, the comptroller is being asked to intercept funds that are supposed to go to the city to operate the city and provide city services, and they're saying, intercept those funds so that they are put into these pensions. And so folks are going to be paying taxes as they are and getting less and less in city services because they're going into the black hole of publicly funded pensions that are never structured properly, didn't follow proper mathematical accounting and as far as how much the pensions benefits should have been relative to the amount of money going in.
So when that intercept occurs, the reality of the impact in Harvey and other places where this has happened is they start cutting into their current police force, their current fire department. They cut those staff so they can pay the pensions of the people who are no longer working there. So the point is there a solution because you can't really raise taxes enough to deal with this problem. And if you can't raise taxes enough to deal with this problem, even a progressive income tax, 3.4 billion, as Governor Pritzker estimates, if that passes in 2020, many say that's still not going to be enough. And so what other solutions do we have? As we've mentioned previously on other shows, if you amend the Illinois Constitution that doesn't allow you to cut pension benefits, then that's one of the things you can do.
It's one of the things, and
just a second.
well, we're running out of time, so.
I know it's important is that the Illinois legislature, on its own, can give these cities and villages the power to file for bankruptcy. It doesn't mean they will, but that threat of bankruptcy may bring the pension holders, the bond holders, to the table to work out a solution so you don't have to impose draconian tax increases that maybe wouldn't solve the problem.
So what's going to happen, this is why you want to pay attention to the Chicago Teachers Union and what's going on in Chicago, even if you're a downstater, because this is increasingly going to be putting pressure on the legislature and the governor going forward. Whatever else they want to do, the state budget, the city budget, the Chicago Teachers Union, Chicago CPS, these budgets are having an anvil tied around their neck, and they're throwing them into the lake. It's pulling down these budgets, and it's just a math problem. And no amount of goodwill can fix the bad math in these pensions.
That's right. So you really have to look at the situation. You have to say, what are realistic solutions? When people say it's not realistic to amend the Constitution, well, we have already, okay, the legislature has already put the progressive income tax on the ballot for November of 2020 to amend the Constitution. So if the Illinois legislature wants to give people this choice, they don't have to make the decision. Just put it on the ballot. Do you ask the voters, do they want to amend the Constitution to allow a decrease in pension benefits? And the voters will decide both the progressive income tax, do they want that? Do they want, that's already on the ballot. If they put this on the ballot, the voters can also decide at the same time, did they want to give their government in the state of Illinois, their governments, the cities and villages, the power to the Constitution? Do they want the
All right, we gotta wrap it.
Not a power to cut pension benefits. Do they want to give their government, state and local, power to decrease pension benefits?
All right.
Finally stated.
Ladies and gentlemen, we always got too much to talk about, too little time, but we thank you for watching us. And Jeff, until next time, we'll say goodbye.